So I'm 66 years of age. I've been married twice. But I now stand before you having come out as a lesbian in my 50s. So I'd like to share my story with you. Is that okay?
Yes.
So it was January 2005. I just celebrated my 58th birthday. And I was facing, but I was also embracing, the end of my second marriage and looking for new adventures. So in May 2005, I set off for Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. I'd been in Chiang Mai for just 2 months. It was the start of a 2-year placement with Australian volunteers. My new colleagues invited me for dinner. It was a hot, steamy night. And as I arrived at the restaurant, a very tall, good-looking foreign man pulled up on his motorcycle outside the restaurant. So we exchanged pleasantries and we discovered that we were both from Australia and that we'd actually be attending the same dinner that night. Well, I found a seat that was closest to the air conditioner. I don't like the heat, that's why I'm moving to the mountains. And I actually settled down then to enjoy my first authentic Thai dinner. But after a short time, my Thai colleagues jumped up and as somebody entered the restaurant, they very animatedly and warmly embraced the last guest to arrive. And they then introduced me, and who then sat at the opposite end of the table to where I was sitting. So as the dinner progressed, the aforementioned last guest to arrive came to sit with me, and I enjoyed some very easy conversation until it was time to leave. So on the way out of the restaurant, accompanied by the last guest to arrive, I admired a blue motorbike parked outside. I've always loved motorbikes. Who was it this year? Rode on the motorbike in the bikini. The bike was identified as belonging to the last guest to arrive, who asked me, would you like a lift home? Oh, no thanks, said I very innocently. Look, I just live 2 blocks up from the restaurant, so I'll just walk. Well, it's a lovely evening. Maybe you'd enjoy a spin up Sitep Road and through the university. Well, that idea actually really did appeal to me because I love the wind in my hair. It was longer then. And what an excellent way to cool down on a hot, steamy night in northern Thailand. So as I climbed on the back of the motorbike, it was suggested that I might feel safer if I moved a little closer and held on tight. So pulling away from the gutter and into the traffic, we whizzed around corners, we sped through the university, and finally arrived back at my apartment. I was buzzing. And it wasn't just the effects of riding on the motorbike. I experienced intense physical and emotional feelings and was shaking. What the heck was going on, I thought. I'd never felt quite like this while riding on a motorbike in the past. So as I slung my leg over the seat of the bike in an attempt to get off, my arm brushed the motorbike rider's owner's body, which resulted in an alarming increase in the shaking of my body. I felt like a teenager again. Can you remember how that felt? Confused, up 1 minute, down the next. Your physical body taking over from reality, your brain all mushy and out of control? Well, that was me, 58 years of age and feeling like a teenager. What was happening? Well, the person driving the motorbike, the last guest to arrive at the restaurant, was actually Elizabeth, Lizzie for short. A 45-year-old American woman, no offence, actually it's positive, I'm later to learn a long-time lesbian, and I was being seduced. Well, the next months flew by in a blissful but very confusing rage of hormones. Hormones that I thought my body had forgotten long ago. I was twice married, mother of 2 adult sons, and a very willing 58-year-old participant in my first lesbian relationship. It was an intense relationship and one I certainly didn't see coming. So when Elizabeth touched me with the intent to pleasure, I fell in love. Not with Elizabeth, but with the act itself. Such intimacy and such accord. Even with the awkwardness of first-time lovers, there was a grace and a purity. Carnal and yet beautiful, that I knew from that moment on I could never live without. I felt I had come home. So what about coming out to family and friends at 58 years of age? Well, luckily I've always been very broad-minded and accepting of other people's relationships and lifestyles. I had integrated these beliefs, I hoped, into my son's upbringing. However, it was going to be me that was coming out to them. I wondered what their reactions would be. So during long-distance telephone conversations with my sons, at that stage, my eldest son Angus was still living in Sydney. I was still in Thailand, of course, and my younger son was living in America. Well, I phoned them up and there was silence at the other end of the line, as you can imagine, when I told them that I was in a lesbian relationship. Their responses were similar. There was silence, followed by the question, "Are you happy, Mum?" Well, that's touched the point. Then in response to my yes, there was a very heartfelt and supportive "Go for it, Mum." My revelation to friends was generally met with positive comments. "Oh, well, thank goodness at last you've realised that you're gay." To, "Oh yeah, I've heard that lots of older women take lesbian lives." Through to, "Good on you, Lou." So what was life like for a 58-year-old woman coming out as a lesbian later in life in a foreign country, away from family and friends? Suffice to say that being in Thailand presented an environment where I felt accepted for who I was. They only knew me in my present incarnation as an out lesbian and not as a heterosexual married woman. Now, they all knew that I'd been married, but it was like that was another life. I felt very accepted. So at the end of 2007, I returned to Sydney. My relationship with Elizabeth had run its course, and we were now just friends, and she remained in Chiang Mai, as she does to this day. After nearly 3 years living and working in Thailand, I wondered what life held for me back in Sydney, a city where I had always been seen as a heterosexual married woman. And I'd now be living life as an out lesbian. Well, gay male friends took me out, but an older woman really stands out, and not necessarily positively in male gay bars. So I quickly turned down their well-meaning invitations. I mined the internet for lesbian groups, focusing on groups for older women in Sydney. Considering Sydney has the supposedly largest community of older dykes in Australia, I found very little information. I was to learn that this public lack of information was because many older long-term lesbian women in our community found it necessary to not reveal being lesbian because of discrimination and fear of what might happen to them, and often a fear of violence. I didn't learn this, of course, until later. My hope is that as more lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer people and their supporters speak out, our society will be more accepting and welcoming of LGBTIQ people. So people often ask me, did you have feelings and thoughts that you were gay when you were younger? Since I was a teenager, I've always had very intense and strong relationships and friendships with women. At school, I did feel attracted to other girls, often, but I thought they were just, you told us just a schoolgirl crush, you'll get over it, or you better get over it. At age 21, I met my first husband-to-be. I fell in love with him and I got married. I mean, you did it then, and you still do it today, right? Young people still do it today. I wasn't around gay women when I was younger. It's probably why I didn't have a gay relationship when I was young. When I left my first husband in the early 1980s, early 1980s, could have been even worse then. It was the height of the women's lib movement, tear your bra off and burn your bra. And there was the potential then of being attracted to other women because this was the era of free love in the 80s. Well, I didn't take that turning then, but instead I met and married my second husband. Clearly I had other lessons to learn, and my coming out was to occur later. Being out as a lesbian has been and continues to be relatively easy for me. I have very accepting sons and friends, with only a few friends I haven't told, and I guess if this is released on YouTube, then my cup's totally But, does it cause me concern? No, it doesn't. I have a strong sense of my identity and a belief that I want to lead my life as authentically as I can. Being an out lesbian is just one of those many aspects of that authenticity, of how I want to live my life. Having said that, I'm very, very conscious that some people's situations are very different to mine. And for them to come out as gay, whether they're a teenager, an old person, middle-aged, whatever age bracket they're in, it can be fraught and it can even be dangerous. So great care and concern needs to be taken in how they live their lives and most importantly who they confide in. It's not up to us to out people. So in conclusion, I'd like to refer back to what Carrie from, you all know Sex and the City, don't you? That terrible TV show. It was a great quote. She said, how does it work? You go to bed one night and wake up the next morning and poof, 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 you're a lesbian. Well, I'm not sure that it happens quite as easily as that. Well, 8 years later, having been involved in 3 amazing and sometimes very challenging lesbian relationships, And at the age of 66, in fact I'll be 67 in 3 weeks' time, I'm deeply and passionately in love with Jude, who's with me today. And next week we'll celebrate 5 amazing years together. So thank you.